Today we're speedrunning Terraria with my friend Purple Hair Guy, so we'll start the speedrun as soon as he spawns in and I click to join his game. Now doing a co-op speedrun has its advantages, like us being able to work on two different things at the same time, but the bosses are going to be a lot harder and we need to share resources so it evens itself out. But for the start, Purple Hair Guy will be making 4 houses and I'll start looking for money.
So first I needed to create the houses for villagers to move in. I built them like this because they only require table, chair, quote, walls, and a certain amount of space to actually work as a house. Now platforms count as walls if you surround them completely, and they're happy about it, so they're pretty much just living outside. Now with these houses, NPCs will move in, and there's 2 specifically we need. The first being the merchant, the second being the demolitionist. The merchant will actually move in after you get 20 silver, and he can be used to sell our stuff to. He'll give us money for it. The demolitionist, we need 5 bombs and the merchant to live in our house, and he'll sell us dynamite, which will pretty much be used in all of our boss fights and more throughout the game. There's actually a third NPC that we don't really need. It's the nurse. We can pay her to heal us. That won't be useful until later in the game. This is also a really weird spawn. I've never seen a Terraria world where the jungle is like literally in the spawn area. It's like a super difficult biome, but it will help us later on in the run.
So while Purple Hair Guy was making those houses, I started my search for gold and headed over to the left. Really quickly I found a snow biome and got crazy good luck for this run. Like right away I found an abandoned house, which means an immediate chest, and in this chest I got an ice sword, which is really good for fighting enemies in early game. I then found a second house, and this one gave me a snowball cannon, which is even better, though we'll get back to that later. And also in this chest I got a gravitation potion, which isn't important right now, but it will be for a boss later in the run. And to make this start even better, I also got a third house in the same section with an extractinator, which is really good to sell, and a feather falling potion, which will also be useful for a boss later on. So after recalling and selling my stuff, I had a total of 6 gold, which would be good enough to take out Skeletron with some dynamite from the demolitionist.
I ended up finding multiple chests while exploring caves. However, they mostly had junk that wouldn't really give me that much money, so I could only buy a few dynamite. But towards the end, I did find a house with a grindstone in it. Now grindstones sell for about 2.5 gold, so pretty penny from that. Also, I found a grubby here and killed it. This does nothing, but it does improve our morale. And I also found a pair of Hermes boots. These give you a super speed boost while running. And after going back and selling all my treasure, I started the elevator, which I'll discuss later.
Now on my way to Skeletron, I took Purple Hair Guy's Hermes boots, which helped a lot with speed. Luckily, we always know that Skeletron will spawn on the side of the ice biome, so I knew he'd be over to the left. I also picked up some snow blocks using a bit of my dynamite here, which let me get snowballs, and those are ammo for the snow cannon. So yeah, I was pretty set for early game enemies. Also on my way to Skeletron, I went through the Crimson. This place is usually awful in early game, but the snowball cannon annihilated the enemies, and I was able to use this time to farm some of the 6 vertebrae that we need to spawn a boss fight later in the game. Finally, once I got to the temple, I found a gold portal with 5 extra gold, which is always nice, and set up for the Skeletron fight, which is a lot easier than you might think. Even so, for safety, we like to have Purple Hair Guy wormhole potion to me, since it will help a little with the fight and exploring the dungeon afterwards, since there's an item in there that we really want. Anyways, on to the fight. I start by throwing 5 dynamite where Skeletron will spawn before summoning him. This gets rid of one of his hands, which is nice since that's the biggest way he does damage. After that, we want to take out his other hand, which just takes a few more dynamite, and hoping we get some good RNG on his attacks, which we did, and that means only the head is left. The rest of this fight now just comes down to intuition. I want to time my dynamite throws with when Skeletron uses his head spin attack. When done correctly, this gets us a ton of damage, and after just a bit, we finished him off, and I even got his really overpowered hook drop, which is nice since we have to make one last hook. But now it's time to go into his temple, where the game really starts getting dangerous. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, make sure you subscribe, and check out Purple Hair Guy's channel since he makes a lot of really great Terraria content. Anyways, in this temple, we have 3 objectives. Get a few water candles for mob grinding, collect 30 bones from killing skeletons so we can spawn Skeletron Prime later in the run, and get a shadow key. And the dungeon is pretty scary because it has a ton of traps that can kill you if you aren't careful, and the enemies in here do a lot of damage, so we need to play smart. Then to get the shadow key, we need to first get a gold key which can drop from enemies in pots, and then use that to open up a gold chest and hope it has a shadow key, which it usually doesn't. Purple Hair Guy and I stayed together for a while, so if one of us dies, the other can stay without having to run back, and eventually Purple Hair Guy got taken out, so he went to go work on the elevator.
The elevator is a combo between the words hell and elevator, created by exploding the ground with dynamite until you reach hell itself, of course. And this comes in handy so many times throughout your run, and it'll be the basis of post-wall of flesh material harvesting. Sadly, since the jungle is right beneath us, I ran into so many railway tracks, which could have led me to awesome, amazing loot, but since this was a speed run, I have to be fast, and I had to skip treasure, which is the saddest thing ever. But I did find heart crystals, and heart crystals give us more HP, which makes runs easier.
And while he was doing that, after way too long in the dungeon, I got all my bones and a shadow key, which is definitely worth the time I spent there, and now I can return to explore the Underworld. At this point of the run, Purple Hair Guy went to work on the bridge for the Wall of Flesh fight, while I went looking for loot. There's a few things we need from the Underworld, but the important ones are a bed, obsidian skin potion, and better weapons. We can find a bed from the houses in the Underworld, and the other stuff in either pots or chests, which I can open with the Shadow Key. Also, another nice thing about the chests is they can have a bunch of additional loot, like Spelunker and gravitation potions, treasure magnets, and stuff to sell, so it's worthwhile to look while Purple Hair Guy builds the bridge. Doing this, I found a Sun Fury, some Hellwing bows, and a bunch of potions. Purple Hair Guy also got a yo-yo, which will be really good for later, so this was a really good section of our run.
Now it's time for the Wall of Flesh fight, which is one of the most basic fights, but also one of the most challenging fights, or not really challenging, but annoying. You need to sacrifice your guide in order to summon the wall, and you can do this in two ways. You can either find a Voodoo Demon and kill it, and then get his Voodoo Doll and throw the Voodoo Doll in the lava, or you can make the guide a lovely house and then break out the floor and set him for a hot bath. After you murder him in cold blood, I guess in hot lava, you pretty much just run in a straight line and time dynamite throws so they explode on the eyes and the mouth of the Wall of Flesh. This isn't as easy as it seems because the wall will speed up as its health gets lower, but as long as you just keep running, you'll probably be fine. Maybe. And just like with Skeletron, we had both me and Easy here just in case I died, but we don't want him throwing dynamite because that'll actually slow down the fight, because if a dynamite explodes the bridge, the other dynamite will fall through it and probably won't hit it. So he just put campfires down to give me a health regen and killed enemies if they tried to kill me. So once the wall is dead, he drops a few important pieces of loot. Sadly, this time he dropped the Clockwork Assault Rifle, which we can't really use because we need ammo for it, and it's just kind of mid-general. But he did drop the Pwn Hammer, which is a guaranteed drop, and this allows us to break Crimson Altars. If you break a Crimson Altar, you spawn Hardmode ores, but before I go and break those altars, I need to chuck an Obsidian Skin Potion, hop down in the lava, and break Hellstone so I can get a pickaxe in order to mine those Hardmode ores. Super complex.
Which means we're back to being separated, since I'll be going for 9 Souls of Light, 9 Souls of Night, and a bunch of Ichor. I always like to start with finding the Souls of Night in the Underground Crimson. To do this, we can see where the game changes a bunch of blocks into Crimstone, and that means we're in the right area. Then we want to place a long bridge of our own Crimstone blocks to hopefully spawn Ichor stickers, since they drop Ichor. Then from here, I can build a platform slightly above the Crimstone blocks and place 2 chests on it, which prevents those blocks from being exploded by dynamite. After that, it's just a matter of building up using wooden planks, putting a water candle down on top to spawn more enemies, and then throwing dynamite on the chest to take out everything that spawns. I can also use the yo-yo I borrowed from Purple Hair Guy to help with any extra enemies, which is really nice since it keeps the Ichor stickers stunned and we can take them out easy. After a while of doing this, we should get a bunch of Ichor, which will turn into Ichor arrows later, and our 9 Souls of Night. So it was time to move over to the right and get our Souls of Light.
Meanwhile, I was mining Hardmode ores. There's actually 3 tiers of ores. Tier 1, 2, 3, which, you know, makes total sense. And you need a pickaxe or a drill of the previous tier to mine the next tier. So since we had Cobalt and then Orichalcum and then Adamantine, I needed a Cobalt pickaxe to mine Orichalcum. Simple as that. And since multiplayer boss fights are actually harder, I always like to mine more to create armor, because, you know, better safe than sorry. Armor gives us more defense means we die slower. Now this would be a waste of time, except Easy's gathering souls while I'm doing this, so we're kind of doing things in tandem, and it's an overall benefit to us. I got back together with Easy at the end to help him get Souls of Light. You know, I'm the better gamer. I gotta get them souls. We got our 9 Souls of Night and our 9 Souls of Light, and we went on to the mechanical bosses. Our first one being the Destroyer, which takes 5 iron bars, 6 vertebrae, which we gathered earlier, and 6 Souls of Night. This dude is literally so easy. We just make a box and a platform with chests on top of it, and we throw dynamite down. The way our structure's built, the Destroyer actually can't hit us, and we just consistently explode him until he dies. It's so incredibly easy. And after defeating the Destroyer, we got lucky and got enough bars to make 2 hollowed repeaters. They're pretty much just crossbows, and we'll need them for our next 2 fights. Now, this is where the Ichor mentioned earlier comes in, as we make Ichor arrows. These arrows actually deal more damage than most other arrows we have access to, and they lower the defense of enemies, meaning they deal even more damage on top of dealing more damage. It's crazy. Now, it was time for the Twins boss fight. This is where a lot of our runs end, because they are kind of a difficult boss, and since we don't have max health and the best armor, they only need a few hits to really kill us. Now the twins are 2 giant metal eyeballs that are named Spasmatism Retinazer, and they do pack a punch with their fire breathing and their laser vision. Kind of scary. I had a gravitation potion which allows me to swap the direction of my gravity so I can fly upwards, while Easy had to do more primitive methods such as jumping and running away. Now if both of us died at the same time, the bosses would despawn, so we'd need to make sure we survived until the respawn timer was up, and after a few unfortunate deaths we managed to defeat our visionary foes, and this leads us to the ultimate mechanical mayhem, the Skeletron Prime fight. However, we weren't exactly confident with the time we had left in the night, because when the sun rises, those bosses disappear, so we decided to snuggle up in bed together and wait for tomorrow. Since sleeping increases the speed time passes in game, we also created a few more houses so the steampunker could move in, and she sells us a jetpack that finally allows us to fly. Once we got a good day's rest, and we bought our trusty jetpacks, we were ready to kill Skeletron Prime. Now, this fight is actually super simple. It's just avoid attacks, shoot his fat head until he dies. You can destroy his hands, but that's a pretty big waste of time, since once you kill the hands, you're not killing the head. And after we killed Optimus Prime himself, we had all the mechanical boss souls, and these souls allowed us to make hollowed pickaxes, which allow us to mine chlorophyte, which we'll use for our next weapon.
And as we look for 120 chlorophyte to make some new weapons, we also want to look for Plantera's bulb, which hides somewhere in the jungle. The bulb can be anywhere in the entire jungle, so this can sometimes take a really long time. At the very least though, it's also a good time to collect some extra hearts and loot that we missed earlier, so it isn't a complete waste of time. And we actually got really lucky, because after less than 10 minutes of searching, we found a Plantera bulb right by our elevator, since we had the really weird jungle placement this run. The only reason we didn't find it sooner is more Plantera bulbs can spawn as time passes, so it probably showed up a little later. We also found enough chlorophyte to make 2 shot bows, which shoot multiple arrows per shot, and will help increase our DPS for the remaining fights. Now on to Plantera, we want to make a fairly big arena by carving out a large section and putting some wooden planks down to walk on. Then with all of that done, we can take out the bulb and start the fight, which is honestly pretty easy. All we need to do is keep confusing Plantera by flying around our arena and constantly get some shots in her. Then even when she transforms into her second phase, she's no match for us and we can take her out, even if I did die right at the end. This also gives us the grenade launcher, which is really useful for our next boss fight, the Golem.
Before we kill the Golem, we actually have to get to the Golem. Now this part's really annoying, since we need to infiltrate the Jungle Temple. Now the Jungle Temple has a ton of traps and these stinky lizard men that'll try to stop us, but they are really no match for us. After reaching the boss room, we broke all the traps that were set inside of it and made a platform towards the ceiling to stand on. Now the Golem is basically 3 parts. He has his hands, his head, and his body. Now the hands will just try to fist you no matter what, and you can destroy them, while the head will only start trying to laser blast you at half health. Once you destroy the head, it'll open its body section. Sadly, we ran into a few tough times here and got wiped while the Golem barely survived. Now this wasn't the end, because this boss can be summoned multiple times. We just had to get back to the boss room, buck up, and fight him again, this time absolutely wiping the floor. And Easy got a sick boss fight clutch.
Now here's where 2 really unfortunate things happened. First, after my high of clutching out the Golem, we got a really good pick saw that I gave to Purple Hair Guy, so he gave me his old pick to sell, but I wasn't thinking at all and ended up selling both his and my pick. So it looks like I'm using an iron pick for the rest of the game. At least it's legendary, but that's not too big of a deal, especially compared to the next thing that happened. See, we were setting up for our next boss, the Lunatic cultist, who's at Skeletron's lair, and to do this, we wanted to create a house for the nurse to move in so we can use her for healing, but she can only change houses during night, and sadly, before she could move in, we got a pirate invasion. Invasions are events that can happen randomly in Terraria, where our village will constantly be attacked by a certain enemy. Now normally this wouldn't be too bad since pirates aren't too hard of an invasion, but we quickly learned that because of this invasion, we couldn't sleep and pass time quickly, which meant the nurse couldn't move in, and we had 2 choices. The first was to wait 15 minutes for night to come and play it safe, while the second was to just not care and try to beat this really hard fight without the nurse, and yeah, pretty obvious what we went with. Now not all was lost for this fight, since we had some really good health potions and we're doing co-op. This meant if one of us got low, the other could try to take aggro from the cultist so we could wait out our potion timer. The real issue with this fight though is when the cultist tries to spawn enemies. He'll sometimes go into this phase where he produces a couple clones, and if we shoot a clone instead of him, or if we take too long to hit him, he spawns a really powerful enemy and we would almost certainly lose the fight. This is why we also removed the floating island in the air, by the way, since we've lost multiple runs to him getting stuck in the island during this attack, which made it so that there was no way to hit him. But other than that, it was just pure focus time, especially since there were a few times where one of us went down and the other needed to stall to give them time to respawn. This was probably the most stressful fight I've done in Terraria, and right when we were finally at the end, the craziest part happened. I was currently in the act of stalling for Purple Hair Guy to get alive again, and literally right as he got respawned, I died, meaning I just barely held out enough for Purple Hair Guy to come in and us to finally beat the fight. So after all that, there's just 4 pillars and 1 Moon Lord to go.
The pillars are essentially mini events that need to be completed in order to summon the final boss, the Moon Lord. They're generally pretty difficult, as the enemies they spawn have a gimmick and are actually like super powerful. You gotta complete each pillar by killing 100 of like the associated enemy, and then destroying the pillar itself, which has like 20,000 HP. Oh my gosh. However, there's a lot of ways to cheese this. The first pillar we needed to clear was the Vortex pillar. Since we were being invaded by Jack Sparrow and his crew of salty sea dogs, we really didn't have time to gear pillar up, so we just had to run into the area and hope for the best. Now we died a bunch, but I managed to dig a hole, so it all worked out. You just have to sit in that hole and shoot upwards, and it will kill everything. There's no chance. And after destroying it, we got the vortex fragments, which we can use to craft the phantasm, which is a really powerful bow, and we'll need it for the next pillar.
Next, we were on to the Stardust pillar, and there's even better cheese for this one. What we want to do is bring a few star cells out of the pillar's range, then again we can dig a hole and shoot up at them. The nice thing about this enemy though is they split into mini star cells when defeated and will grow back into regular ones after waiting a bit. So we can take out 100 of these and call it a day. Then all that's left is taking out the pillar like usual, and we get the Stardust Dragon, which is an insanely strong summon that we'll be using for the rest of the speedrun. We also were able to finally get rid of the pirate invasion here, which is pretty important for a bit later, so things were starting to come together.
The third pillar we were doing was the solar pillar. This one's actually really interesting as you have to do a super weird cheese for it. You have to get as high as you can in the sky so there's no blocks for enemies to spawn on. You can do this with junction boxes, which can oddly be placed with nothing around them, and then you can place a platform on top of them, which you can hook to stay in the air. Then we built essentially what is a giant fishing hook and stood on top of it and let our Stardust Dragons do their thing and destroyed the pillar by just shooting off the side of it without any enemies spawning. It's really awesome. This gave us some solar fragments, which we used to craft daybreaks, which will be our main weapon for the Moonlord fight.
And finally, our fourth pillar is the Nebula pillar, which is going to be the hardest one since we won't be using cheese for it. I also unfortunately was on my own for the beginning of this fight since Purple Hair Guy was busy building our arena for the Moonlord, and my loneliness made me die a few times. Other than that, there's not too much to say, besides the fact that Purple Hair Guy got a hollowed hood, which allows him to have another segment on his Stardust Dragon. Sadly, we only had enough resources for one, but it was really helpful for defeating the last pillar and getting onto the Moonlord. And the Moonlord's honestly not too bad of a fight with the structure that Purple Hair Guy made. Basically, we have the nurse trapped in a really uncomfortable space so she can heal us in this stone structure at the top so the Moonlord can't hit us with his laser beam attack. After that, all we need to do is use our daybreaks to hit the Moonlord's head and hands to get him onto his next phase. The only real worry is with the nurse. We always need to pay attention to our health and make sure we don't die, but we can't always have her heal menu open because then she won't be able to heal and will end up dying herself. Because of this, for the first time in our 80 hours of practice, Purple Hair Guy died instead of me during the Moonlord fight, and I had to clutch up, which was terrifying. Like many other times in this run though, I was able to clutch up when it was needed and get the Moonlord onto his last phase, where we recall over to our bed and start shooting down. You can't see the Moonlord's eye on his chest because the background is covering it, but it's really easy to take out. And finally, after 4 months of practicing this speedrun, we completed it in 2 hours, 49 minutes, and 39 seconds, which will land us 9th place on the speedrun.com leaderboards, and we'll take it, especially after dealing with everything that went wrong. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe and check out Purple Hair Guy's channel for more great Terraria content. Bye!